Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the first meeting of the 2022 legislative session of the Montgomery County House Delegation on behalf of myself, Mark Corman, and our Vice Chair, Delegate Al Carr. It's good to see everybody. We always like to sort of start off this first meeting by thanking our staff, Rebecca Stryer, who is once again serving as our administrator for the delegation and in our office, as well as our terrific counsel from the Department of Legislative Services, Jennifer Young, John Edwards, Benjamin Voigt, and Kelvin Lucas. We really appreciate their support. And of course, it should be noted that they've been supporting us for the past couple of months because all of you, the members and the committee chairs, have been very busy moving some bills. So we have a very full agenda today because of all your hard work, even before the session began. So thank you for that. Also want to thank all the House members for signing on our alternative fuel corridors letter that went over to the Department of Transportation yesterday. Vice Chair Carr, anything you want to add at the top here?
Nothing to add, Chair.
Great. And we're also joined this morning by the Senate Delegation Chair, Chair Kramer. I don't know, Chair Kramer, if you want to add anything.
Just want to say good morning to all. And again, my thanks also to Rebecca, as well as Carol McDermott, who is staffing the Senate delegation. And with that, I thank you.
Terrific. And you and Carol are promising that all of our House delegation bills that we send over are going to fly through this year, right?
Easy peasy.
Sounds great. We appreciate it. We are going to start this morning with a briefing from our Montgomery County Executive and Council President Albornoz. And before I turn it over to you all, no strict time limit, but I think some members have questions. So just keep that in mind as you're going through here. So Mr. County Executive, the floor is yours. And thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us. And happy to be here this morning. I think you guys know I'm still dealing with COVID, so I'm in day 14. This is getting tedious. I'd like a negative test. If you guys could arrange that, that would be really helpful. But life goes on. So I know you got a lot on your plates in Annapolis this session, and there seem to be some really important issues: COVID, climate, cannabis, crime, redistricting, and that budget surplus that you all are staring at. And the elephant in this room, unfortunately, continues to be addressing the fallout from the pandemic. And I think we're going to be picking up the pieces for some years to come on the COVID front, since it's still having a major impact as we sit here. And many are still in need of assistance from the first wave. And the other real impact that's having on the county government and on the school system is hiring and personnel. I mean, the great retirement is a real thing. And the depletion of women from the workforce because of the overall lack of childcare and the issues with children is a real thing. And it's harder and harder to hold on to people. And when people are looking for jobs, they're expecting higher pay and they're expecting lots more teleworking. So it's a challenging time to be hiring and replacing people. And we're continuing in a lot of our departments to try to fill vacancies. We're not in a freeze, but we're still finding we're not getting positions picked up as quickly as we'd like to. We know that the impacts are disproportionate. We still see them in the county. As much as we've done on distribution of test kits and vaccinations, there are still pockets where it's clear, we all know who lives in those pockets, where the rates of whether it's tested or vaccinated still linger a little bit below the county average. On the other hand, I think we've done a pretty good job of moving toward getting people boosted. We're over 55% boosted. I think this is probably caused by a national problem. I think we took the booster too lightly. I mean, we kind of said, oh, it'll be like your flu booster, which people get, but nobody has any urgency for. And there's actually urgency for this booster. It's the urgency of 2 shots will not protect you from Omicron, and the booster will give you significant protection. That's not anything anybody ever says about the flu. So I think that generally this country kind of let its guard down in dealing with COVID, and that's probably why we're dealing with as much spread as it is, because I don't think people understood quite what Omicron was. I mean, I put out my newsletter today and reminding residents that when we made our plans, when the school system made their plans in this fall, they were dealing with Delta. And by the first week of December, they were dealing with Omicron. And Omicron is not Delta. It's like somebody put a different team on the field and the same defense for one team is not going to work for the other team. And everybody's figuring out how to morph their responses around that. But we're working to stay on top of this wave, and we're doing everything we possibly can to help support MCPS. That has been somewhat frustrating, but we're there if we can help them, if we can get them kits or whatever else they need. We try. They had asked us to reach out on bus drivers. We've sent a formal letter to the state, asking if they have any. We know the answer is going to be no, but we feel we're obligated to make sure at least we ask, because getting kids to school is important. I know that there's an interest in placing a referendum on the question of legalizing adult recreational use of marijuana, and I look forward to the details of how that'll be implemented. I would encourage people to give some thought to the idea of letting the distribution go through state stores and letting the local jurisdictions capture the retail revenues off this. Despite the surplus, which is a one-time elephant, there are massive needs we have in all of our counties. And if we could capture the revenues, that would be a plus. If we were able to sell it in a way, for example, no advertising, no promotion, to keep this from becoming like it is in California or some of the other states, I think we'd have a better chance of controlling it. It might make it more appealing to some of the more conservative people who worry about distribution and where it's going to go. And there's no one we're harming in the business world, because there is no recreational marijuana business right now. And I think standing up something that we would actually benefit from might be worth thinking about. I know the jury's still out on whether implementing legislation will accompany the ballot question, but certainly it would be better to have that done before it's legalized, so people know immediately what they can go into rather than hashing it out after that. On the climate front, we have very aggressive goals for reducing greenhouse gases. We've run into one bump in the Ag Reserve. Potomac Edison reached its limit on how much solar it had to absorb last year before a single farmer was able to get a solar plan approved. And people are on a waiting list for this year to see whether they can get into the Potomac Edison catchment area. So the state has some regulations that govern what percentage of the different power companies' power supply can come from community solar. It needs to be bumped up. Otherwise, this might be the second year when nobody can get a solar field in. And we've got multiple farmers who tried to get the fields in and they can't do it. So any help you can do on that. And if you can, the big elephant in the room is electrifying the grid, and everybody wants everything all electric. The state's guidelines are beyond 2035, which are the county's guidelines. If the state were to push its requirements that the grid be cleaned by 2035, it would make the electrification of the county and the entire state way easier. And I think it's worthwhile thinking about ways to bump that timeline up rather than leaving it out there where it is right now. We know that we've seen the governor's rhetoric on crime. We're continue to be concerned. We have a wave again, like pretty much everybody else does. But our officers are, I think they're doing a better job of telling people what they've done. We've had some really successful case breaks over the last couple of weeks, and they're actually winding up talking about them, which is a big plus. So any money that the governor has that would affect police pay is especially important. Montgomery County is the probably the lowest or second lowest police department in terms of pay in the region. And we've tried to raise it, and not successfully. And so we're negotiating with them again. They negotiated with us 2 years ago on a pay package that would deal with starting salaries and equity across the pay scale. And we're negotiating again with them on that. And hopefully this time it'll go through the council. But we recognize pay is a big issue here. And it's hard enough being a police officer in this climate. I don't think anybody should be confused about that. And being in the worst paid jurisdiction does not help or enhance our ability to recruit people. So we feel pretty strongly we need to be able to do something on that front. We need to be able to do something that's going to be meaningful. What else I got here? Excuse me a minute, my stupid computer also misbehaves. We're on the school front, we've been moving forward with redoing our capital budget. I want to thank you all for everything you were able to do to make it possible to get a better return on our investment in the state level. We put money into the budget to cover the prevailing wage, which gets us a higher payback on state funding. The school system finally agreed. They did their own analysis and concluded that yes, prevailing wage was worthwhile. We got more money than we would spend. Our budget bakes in that prevailing wage assumption, and we fund the out years to put that money into the budget in the later years of our 6-year budget cycle as well, so that it's reserved and everybody knows it's out there. We're encouraged by that, and I'm encouraged by working with the school system on things like climate change. For example, they've actually agreed to work with our people who are solarizing as much of the county as they can, to let our consultants and our partners look at all the school sites for potential solar installations. And the school system put out their first ESCO contracts this year, which the county does. And I think you guys know the ESCO contracts let you pay for improvements out of energy savings, which means we could move some of these projects out of the capital budget lane and turn them into basically a fee for services kind of arrangement. So we're excited about that. We desperately need transportation money. That rotten deal that the governor concocted on I-270, 495. There's not enough money. $60 million doesn't move the CCT. It gets us money for some design, but it's not enough to actually move the project. We're redesigning the CCT a little bit. It's probably going to come down Shady Grove Road rather than go down through the middle of King Farm. And there's a ton of development coming up on Shady Grove Road. I mean, a ton of development across from the Home Depot. And it's a combination of housing, but it's also lots of life sciences. Montgomery County is adding millions of square feet of life sciences investment. And that's going to be a big plus for the county. And I think moving the BRT down Shady Grove is going to help us take advantage of this, what's going to be a pretty booming area over there. And we're in a position to move forward on applying for federal funding for the BRT between Rockville and Germantown. And we're looking at financing for the lower part of the BRT as well, and also Veers Mill Road from Wheaton up to Rockville. So those pieces are starting to come into place, and we're ready to go out for federal funding. And I know that you all are looking at that pile of money in the surplus. One of the things that would be really useful would be to consider using some of the surplus money for school projects and other things you've funded where the construction costs have gone completely out of sight. I mean, the budgets that the schools set for their projects that we'll be funding over the next 6 years, some of them, we're already in our queue and they're finding they can't build them at the price that they thought they were going to be able to build them. We're not talking about small changes. We're talking about sometimes 30% or more changes in capital costs. So I'm sure we're not the only jurisdiction dealing with this. And so any money that could come potentially out of that surplus to help school districts deal with construction costs would be really, really important. Something on the MCPS front that might be helpful also is a temporary reprieve from the state regulations about absences in schools. If a kid is home and they get a positive test, they are unexcused absence unless they bring in a doctor's note. And, people are basically told, you don't go to a doctor. Kaiser's never asked me to come in despite having a positive test unless your case gets more symptomatic and, more of a problem. So parents who, have a positive case and are keeping their kid home without a doctor's note, it's an unexcused absence. It's causing enormous anxiety. I think waiving that state regulation for the months of January and February, and hopefully maybe not needing it in March, would be a big deal. and would take some of the pain that these families are suffering. It's people are really frustrated and angry about having their kids mark truant when they know their kid's home sick, and not being able to just write a note saying my kid tested positive and I'm keeping him home until he tests negative. So that's another thing where I think you all could be helpful. I know you've got a handle on redistricting, and basically, we're here to help you if there are things that you want us to weigh in on and help down in Annapolis. I'm always willing to go down there. I've tried to spend a lot of time down there when I could, and hopefully this year I'll be back down in Annapolis and talking to people. And the county executives are talking with each other, and we're going to have regular discussions about what kind of things we think we can jointly support among all the folks in the county. So with all that, thank you very much, and thank you for all your work in the off season, or in the interim, as Rich told me I should refer to it as. Some of that stuff is really paying off right now, and look forward to working with you going forward.
Thank you, Mr. County Executive. We hope you are continuing to feel better. I think folks are taking advantage of it, but please use the raise hand function. But before we start with the questions, I'd like to give the council president an opportunity to give the all-important legislative branch an update.
Sure. Well, thank you, Delegate Corman. I'm going to try to stick to the 5 minutes that you all allocated for our presentations, and then open it up, obviously, for Q&A. I want to begin by just deeply, deeply, deeply thanking all of you for your continued dedication and service. For the last 7 years, you've had to uniquely play defense and offense, given the interactions with the executive branch at the state level and the governor. And your continued leadership in so many areas has been so groundbreaking and deeply respected. What this delegation has been able to accomplish over the last 3 years in the midst of unprecedented challenges is truly remarkable, and something you all should be very proud of. And while we're obviously all meeting virtually and would prefer to be meeting in person, this is just the sign of the times of where we are. Just a quick disclaimer, I followed the lead of Delegate Shetty and got a rescue puppy. And so if he barks, I apologize in advance. He's being really good right now, but so far so good. Let's hope it keeps that way. But I also want to spend a special shout out to Delegate Foley. Welcome. We look forward to your continued leadership as well. And we know you're have joined a pretty phenomenal team here. I'm going to start with the schools issues. As the county executive mentioned, it readjusts some of the notes that I had going into this, because it's the biggest issue facing us right now. As the county executive said, we're having operational challenges across every sector of local government. Just 2 weeks ago, we had at its height over 200 fire and rescue personnel out all at the same time, which deeply impacted operations. The last snow event, we were down 25% of our operators, which handicapped us in our ability to respond to that incident. And we've seen shortages in emergency rooms, in our health clinics, which is really impacting our overall public health infrastructure in ways that we never thought was possible. And so everybody is exhausted on every level. And of course, within MCPS, things have been challenging, difficult, doesn't even do justice to what we're seeing right now. And we share your frustration with the operational issues that have come forward, especially over the last 2 weeks. I do appreciate the school system's acknowledgement that communication absolutely had to be at a higher level, should have been more clear all the way through, and could have helped avoid at least some of the confusion felt by personnel, staff, and most importantly, our families, and the children, of course, themselves. And so we know that while the obvious, it seems, decision to remain open has been the principal goal, which we all can in principle agree with, it does also seem clear that the operational issues have risen to a level that call into question whether that remains even possible. Now, I will say that the council obviously does not, nor should it, have a direct role in operating decisions within the school system. That should be done by the people that are on the ground. It should be done by the duly elected members of the Board of Education who work tirelessly on behalf of all of us. But the council has continued to provide support, and there have been many, and I mean many, conversations by my colleague, Councilmember Rice, who's the chair of our Education and Culture Committee, me as council president, but all of us talking to as many of the stakeholders as possible to try and be helpful. We were able to procure over 200,000 emergency test kits that have been now disseminated to all of our respective schools. We have been able to increase the volume of K95 masks, which have also been distributed to schools as well. And we did approve and support test sites and vaccination sites within the schools themselves. The superintendent presented to the Board of Education yesterday, which I'm sure you all probably saw, but it does appear that the good news, and this is true of the county as a whole and most of our region, except in Northern Virginia, is that the numbers are starting to slowly decline. It does appear that we are either at our peak or just it's starting to come down a little bit from here. And there is a hope that starting next week, you're going to see market improvement in a variety of different ways. So we are all holding out hope for that. But at the height, we had 4,900 positive test cases one day. We are down to 2,500, and that has been consistent over the last 3 days. We also have seen, as you've probably read, that if you are fully boosted, that does give you a much stronger, it puts you in a much better position to fend off this particular strain. And so the hospitalization rates that we're seeing continue to be among those that are the most, that are unvaccinated, the most serious cases. And the council is immediately looking at taking some additional steps. We extended the mask mandate until later this month, but we will be reviewing it again to see if it needs to be extended again. And the county executive presented a plan for proof of vaccination to enter into certain businesses, similar to what the District of Columbia is enacting tomorrow, and similar to what the City of New York enacted back in September. And so we are deliberating over that, and that will likely pass in some version with amendments, but we are going to move forward and continue to do everything that we can in the short term to mitigate what's happening on the ground right now and provide any and all support, whether it's the most clear support the council can provide is in funding, but we're doing everything we can and pulling every lever we can. But we do acknowledge the frustration and anger that's out there. We know you're feeling it as well. We're getting messages, emotional, just off the charts emotional, understandably so, from faculty and staff who are scared, who are exhausted, who are overwhelmed, who just don't know how they're going to keep doing this in the way that they've been doing it. We're also getting incredibly emotional testimony from parents whose children have suffered tremendous emotional issues because of the closures from before and are terrified that even for a short time, the school system will close again. So it's just a wide range of opinions, but we have to honor and acknowledge just the difficulty before us right now. The last couple of things I'll mention before opening up for Q&A are just personal priorities as council president this year in the space of public health and food insecurity, particularly among children and youth and families. We're going to go big as we have been in that space. And I know you all have been tremendous advocates, but I think there's an opportunity for us, particularly in the public health space, to not repeat some of the same mistakes we've made in the past and acknowledge what happens when we continue to repeat those mistakes with just unethical and tragic consequences. But and so things like the Restoration Center, which I think are going to be critically important to help us address at least some of the mental health challenges that are being experienced by county residents right now, would be tremendous. And I do want to give a shout out to Delegate Lopez and Senator Lee on the ghost gun legislation that I know is before you all this session. There were 998 guns confiscated in Montgomery County last year, a significant increase over the year before. I don't have the specific percentage of ghost guns as it relates to that 998, but it is alarmingly high. And these weapons are getting into the hands of children. There was a 14-year-old boy who has been charged with the homicide in Germantown of a 24-year-old young man who was murdered in front of his 15-year-old brother and his 9-year-old brother. That's just next level tragic and unacceptable. And so we have to do something about these weapons. We passed local legislation through a zone text amendment, but it only goes so far, and it's being challenged in the courts as we speak. And so we really need that to help address at least some of the elements of the crime issues that the county executive mentioned. So with that, I'll stop and yield to you, Delegate Corman, to answer any questions or try our best to that you all may have. Thank you.
Thank you, President Albanaz. Let me turn to my colleagues. We'll start with Delegate Wilkins, who we also hope is feeling well.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the county executive and the council president for their presentation today. I wanted to talk a little bit more as someone who's on day 8 of their quarantine and recovery. And I know, Mr. County Executive, that you were impacted recently as well. I want to talk about the access to PCR tests and the turnaround time and what we can do to improve that. So quick story time, if you all can indulge me, and why I'm asking about this after personally experiencing it. When I first experienced symptoms, I was lucky enough to have an at-home test. And I took an at-home test and it said that I was negative. So I think a lot of people would have just continued on about their lives and potentially impacted and infected more people. But we know that the at-home test, although we have been pushing them out, and I think it's great that the county has been pushing them out, we know there's 2 tests in there for a reason, given that at-home tests sometimes don't pick up the virus early on. So that's why my focus is making sure that we have the access to the PCR tests. I took 2 PCR tests and I had to use my insurance in order to get a quick turnaround time, knowing that we were supposed to be on the floor in a couple of days and I didn't have the luxury of waiting a week or a really long time to find out the results. So people having to sort of go through their insurance if they have it or pay out of their pocket in order to get a quick turnaround time is another issue. So the second test that I took, which was the free widely available test, I just got the results for it yesterday, saying that I was positive. So I think that given the number of tests that I had to take, going through insurance, paying for some of them, and the long turnaround time in terms of the testing, I think is a huge challenge in terms of us being able to really clamp down on this virus, given that sometimes it's cold-like symptoms and people maybe think they have a cold and keep moving around as normal. So I just wanted to hear from the council president and the county executive, if you could just expand on, given the high demand, the number of cases, how we can ensure greater access, that people aren't waiting in long lines, but also really importantly, the quick turnaround time on the PCRs so that people can know that if they're positive and be able to quarantine and act accordingly.
Go ahead, Mr. County Executive, I'll follow you.
So I'll tell you a little bit about what I know about the PCR tests. First, PCR tests are more accurate from the very beginning, and the rapid tests are less accurate initially, but rapid tests are more accurate at the end of your cycle because it measures the antigen. And if you use a PCR test, you could test positive on a PCR for a month or more, even after you've actually gotten rid of the virus. All of our testing is done by private partners, and all our private partners are having the combination of the 2 things that we're experiencing. One is large demand for their tests and lack of staff. They can't fill it out. I'm a Kaiser member. Kaiser went from telling us that, if you get a PCR test, you'll get your results in 1 to 2 days, The last time I checked with them, it was 3 to 5 days, and that's Kaiser. There's just not the people power out there in the private companies that do this in order to process the tests as fast as people need them processed. And I'm sure that they would love to process faster, but at least they say they're not able to bring in the staff they need to get the test process faster. And that's a hard thing for the government to do, because I would have to buy multiple machinery, and if I could get it even, and operate special testing centers, which is like when I tried to do this early on, I discovered there are all kinds of state regulations in terms of how you process tests. So this is not as easy as people think it is. So I don't have a simple answer other than we keep telling them, you need to do this faster, you need to do this faster. Apparently money is not the solution. They may prioritize you if you put more money on the table, but if everybody put more money on the table, you'd still have the same number of people clamoring for their inability to process that volume in the timely manner. I do not have a good solution.
For Delegate Wilkins, first, I'm glad, I hope you're feeling better. I hope it was not severe. You look good. But just a couple more just data points for context. We're doing about 80,000 PCR tests per day through county clinics, which is a very high number. As the county executive mentioned, it is true that the labs are experiencing tremendous challenges with staffing. The good news is they have improved. And so the turnaround times are going to improve moving forward. I received that update this morning from the Chief Administrative Officer. We've ordered an additional 1 million rapid test kits to bring us to a total of 2.1 million, which will have been disseminated by the end of next week. And so the long lines that we saw, especially that first day, are going to hopefully begin to dissipate further and improve markedly over the next several days. That does not take away the frustration that people felt last week and this week in particular. And I know that every time someone has a negative interaction with our local government, it plants a negative seed that builds distrust and is something that is hard to overcome. But I do have some hope that things are going to start to improve. And as I said before, it does appear that, as was predicted, that Omicron is going to leave as quickly as it came in, just based on some of the numbers that we're seeing. And New York has always been the bellwether because they have been ahead of the rest of the country in terms of where they are with spread and hospitalization rates because of the nature of the travel of New York. And they started to see a decline earlier this week. And they're typically between 5 and 7 days ahead of us. And so they're a decent bellwether at this point. So it's not a perfect solution or answer, Delegate Wilkins, but I own and acknowledge what you experienced, and I'll be candid, me as well, because it did take longer than it should have for me to get my result earlier this week. I did get it. I was negative, but it turns out I had the flu. But it is something that we all have to bear in mind. And it's hard for families to be able to make decisions when they're in limbo and they don't know what's going on. The world doesn't stop just because you haven't gotten your positive test or not yet. So I just want to acknowledge that.
Great. Thank you, Delegate Wilkins. Delegate Resnick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. County Executive and Council President, for being here. Not sure if you would address this at all in the beginning of your discussion. I apologize for being late. My computer decided that it needed to update at this particular moment. But I've been hearing from concerns from daycares and preschools. As you know, they are licensed by the state and they're responsible to the county. And what they are seeing is very conflicting guidance with regard to quarantining and testing and everything else. And so not only does it add to the confusion, but when, daycares have to, students have to be out for 24 days or whatever the current number is, because somebody in the class tested positive, because the inconsistency between policies between county and state, what you are doing is not only putting a lot of pressure on the daycares and the preschools, but you're also putting a lot of pressure on the families with young kids who may not be able to quarantine as easily for as long as literally the rest of the known universe. So could you tell me a little bit about what's happening with that particular policy, and if we can get some consistency across the board to relieve those facilities from burdensome rules?
Mr. County Executive, do you want to tackle it? I'm happy to try and answer that, but I want to defer to you. And then
I was going to say, my answer is probably equally unsatisfactory. I mean, when the first memos I saw on this is that our people were waiting for direction from the state, and that they were following what technically is the state guidance on this, which doesn't comport apparently with CDC guidance on this. And what a shock. So they're waiting for the ability they're waiting for the state to change the guidance, and then we'd follow the state guidance. I think that is, that's the short of what I thought the conflict had been.
I'll just add a couple of things. I want to credit my colleague, Councilmember Friedson, who's been a bulldog on this issue. No question, there's a tremendous amount of confusion hitting a sector that has already, been whittled away in ways that are awful. And so on the good news front, we did just issue 40,000 rapid test kits to childcare providers. And so, that will help some. But we are, as the county executive noted, and we have asked this question consistently sitting as the Board of Health to our colleagues on the public health team who are trying to advise these organizations. My understanding is that a town hall had been or will be scheduled specifically with childcare providers to create more of a direct Q&A option. I'll follow up, Delegate Resnick, to learn exactly when that is and make sure you all are aware of it. But clearly we need to provide more direct information in real time.
Great. Delegate Kelly, do you have a question and maybe some clarifying comments as well?
Yeah, I actually spoke with the Department of Health about this the other day, and I was told that it was included in the state guidance. I believe the January 6th guidance, but I will confirm what date it was and make sure that the county has the excerpt. They did update the state guidance to be consistent with the CDC guidelines. So I think the county can then follow that.
Yes.
And I know it was buried because I didn't see it, but it is in there. So we will find it. Make sure you have it.
Thank you.
And Dr. Stoddard actually told me earlier this week that new guidance would probably be out as soon as today at the county level. So Delegate Kelly, did you also have a question? Your hand had been up.
I absolutely did. Thank you. I didn't realize it was my turn yet. I actually wanted to just I could talk about COVID all day, every day. I think everyone knows that, but let me just shift a little bit, referring back to the county executive's original remarks. And I would love the council president's thoughts on this as well. As you mentioned, we're dealing with a number of really important issues at the state level this year. One of the ones that we're also planning to tackle is related to the Supreme Court cases on abortion and the changes we may be seeing this spring. We expect after that ruling that up to 26 states could ban or severely limit access to abortion. Montgomery County is in a group of 1 in 3 counties in Maryland that provides access to abortion care. The other 2/3 of Maryland counties have no abortion providers in them right now. So what we're going to see happen on the national level is going to have a really serious impact on access to care in Montgomery County. We're already providing a disproportionate amount of care in the state. So we're going to have a package of bills at the state level called the Abortion Care and Access Act. I know the Montgomery County Commission on Women is going to be supporting this bill, but I wanted you to weigh in. Just, the legislation's intent is to increase access to abortion providers, increase access to training for abortion providers, and increase affordability so that folks, deductibles and things like that are not preventing them from accessing care. So I just like your thoughts on that, and hopefully county perspective as the session moves on how important that is for people accessing healthcare in Montgomery County.
Since I consider choice to be an absolute right, anything we can do to support that, and if we have to take up a heavier load because surrounding jurisdictions won't, then we'll make sure we're able to facilitate whatever abortion providers need us to facilitate. I'm happy to come down and be very vocal about supporting any legislation that deals with this issue. This to me is just a fundamental right. It's not even debatable. So tell me what you need and point me in the direction you want me to fire, and I will go fire, but we'll make sure on our level that if there are any impediments, we're able to deal with them. I don't see any impediments. And I've been to the clinics here before.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges in Montgomery County we're seeing specifically is what you referenced earlier. We see a wave of retirements. So we definitely need to do what we can to increase training and access to care. So this will help with that.
Yeah, and there is some difficulty with some landlords not wanting to put a clinic in because they're reticent to have protesters outside. But we'll support any landlord and protect anybody who needs to be protected.
Thank you. Delegate Lutke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Executive, Mr. President, I appreciate your comments earlier. I do think, we need to speak and talk and act with a pretty strong sense of urgency in the school system issues. I hesitate normally to exaggerate, but I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that the school system is in crisis right now. And I know you all have been hearing it too from parents and students. I will tell you, just in the last 24 hours, some of my former colleagues shared with me words I've never heard from teachers describing sort of the consequences of the bad decision-making and communication as, I think the most eloquent version I heard was as if it were a zombie movie. It's extreme what's happening. So my first question is, the county executive, Mr. Executive, in your comments, you mentioned that the county was assisting the school system, particularly with the bus driver shortage, although the shortage of substitute teachers is also having extreme impacts in schools right now. Beyond sending a letter to the state that you suggested you knew in advance would not get a response, what has the county done to support the system in resolving those staffing shortages?
But it's a state system, not a county system. They have not asked for any resources or identified anything where they want us to help with the hiring. These would be county school system employees, and their pay scale. I think I saw a note from you. Their pay scale is their pay scale, $17.28 for a bus driver per hour. That doesn't cut it, $31,000 a year. We're there if they need something to do that. The school system's still sitting on $400 million of federal money. I have no idea what their future plans are for that federal money, but it seems like, and we've told them, they should start using this money to start paying for these things. They've got the capacity to change the pay scale if they want. We've submitted on our end, we've submitted a bill on county bus drivers because we're hemorrhaging bus drivers to WMATA. I'm sure school bus drivers with CDL licenses can go to WMATA and get paid multiples of what they get paid in Montgomery County. And they're addressing it. I looked at SEIU's wage scale. SEIU starts, I think it's $16.53 an hour at the bottom of their pay scale. Those are things that if the school system does it and puts it in the budget, we'll support it. But they've got to tell us, what they need or what they're thinking. And, they don't share with us what they're doing on this.
I'm sorry to put it this way, but I don't think any of us, and I mean, I think all of us share responsibility for the challenges MCPS is facing. I don't think it's up to one institution or one set of elected officials. You said they haven't reached out to you. Has the county reached out to them?
I've told Manifa personally, let us know what you need, that we can help you deal with, problems. Let us know what you need over there and we'll support you, whether it's money, whether it's changes in laws. I know that when they were hiring school psychologists and trying to do that, they were having trouble. So we said, you can use our HHS folks. We'll work with you to facilitate the hiring of people for those social worker jobs they're trying to fill. We are trying to use whatever we can to facilitate their ability to move people. But we're not successful in hiring bus drivers. It's not totally surprising that they're not successful in hiring bus drivers. There's a huge pay gap. But like I said, we've been very clear that we will help you. Just let us know what you want us to do so we can do that. And when they've asked, we'll do it.
I appreciate that. I do think, though, that we can't pretend that the current shortages are purely the result of COVID. We've had, on the substitute side, I mean, since I haven't been in the classroom since 2015, and we had shortages of short-term subs in the classroom at the time. Mm-hmm. And we can't pretend either that MCPS makes its decisions about what it pays its employees entirely on its own. They depend on the county for funding. And so, for example, I looked up the Department of Legislative Services numbers on the MCPS budget. And in FY19, the MCPS budget was 64.5% county funding. In FY20, it was 63.3% county funding. In FY21, it was 62.8% county funding, which means that progressively, the funding for the school system that the state has been increasing is being used to supplant rather than supplement. And that has long-term impacts. When the school system's negotiating its employee salaries, it has long-term impacts. And the result of that is that subs and bus drivers get paid less than a living wage in Montgomery County. So I'm glad to hear you say you've offered the school system anything they need. But this isn't just about like the last couple weeks, right? It's about, the last 10 years of underfunding the school system. But let me ask a couple sort of more specific questions. Did the county, the rapid tests that the school system distributed earlier this week, the county assisted in providing those, right?
Yes.
Why did it take until this week for those to get out? Why weren't we able to get those out as soon as students were back in school?
Because we didn't have them as soon as students were back in school. We were scrambling like everybody else to get rapid tests. We put in an order for tests, I want to say back in the fall, with one of the guys who do that, I think it's the Binax test. We weren't able to get tests. We have an outstanding order for months now, and them not able to provide it. We got a lead from DC when DC announced they found rapid tests, and so we jumped on the lead from DC and we're able to piggyback on it. But we'd been searching. I know Ash had been, contacting people he knew. I've talked to a company in Montgomery County. They're not coming online for production until February, but they're another likely group now that we can deal with, because they'd like to actually help Montgomery County. They feel some loyalty here, but there was a real shortage of tests out there. I mean, and this is national news. It's not like Montgomery County was the only place that couldn't find rapid tests. Nobody found them. But as soon as we got the word that DC had them, we went right after them. We were able to follow up right away and get the tests. We made them available as soon as they came in. They came off a truck and they were sorting them and putting them out to the schools immediately after that.
And the same is true with the KN95 masks that are being distributed, I think, at secondary schools today.
Yeah, we have the large masks, and there's been an order placed for the small masks.
Well, look, I appreciate you all coming here, and I appreciate what you're saying. I do think we all need to avoid blaming one institution or another. This is all hands on deck. What I haven't seen from the school system, and I know they're going to be coming to speak to the delegation soon, is an explicit plan for how to address the driver shortage and the sub shortage. You mentioned it earlier, but we do have a bill in drafting to mandate minimum salaries in MCPS at the level of the living wage in Montgomery County. And there's a statewide bill that's being worked on to increase ESP salaries across the board, which will affect the bus drivers. But that's going to take, even if we pass legislation, months before it comes into effect. And the problem is right now. So, Mr. Chairman, I know we're going to have MCPS at some point, but I hope they will come prepared with explicit plans. And I hope that the county will come with them with explicit offers to help resolve the problem immediately.
Eric, can I just say one thing about funding levels? I mean, I did 12 years on the other side of the street, and I've done 3 years over here. We funded their requests, and we don't tell them, don't ask for more than X. That's never worked. We've always been willing to fund their budgets. They came over. The one time we didn't, I actually sent to the council legislation to authorize a 4-cent tax increase using the Rich Madaleno escape hatch. I think it was Rich's escape hatch, might have been yours too, where a simple majority of the council could vote to increase taxes specifically for schools. That was totally rejected. It was a 4-cent tax increase. But without that, we weren't able to fund their requests. So, sometimes funding things requires a willingness to move in tax areas. And if you, so, I will continue to try to fund their budgets as they bring them over. My approach has been to take their budgets as what I need to put money in the budget for, this year. We're waiting for their operating budget. We'll know what that's going to be. I know they're hoping for more state money to deal with some of that. But, my preliminary on this year's budget, for example, is $131 million over maintenance of effort. And when you consider that my fungible budget's about $1 billion, when you take out schools, debt, all the other stuff, $131 million is going to be an enormous lift. Now, Manifa said they're assuming some things about additional state aid. I don't know what's going to pan out or not. But at some point, without a change in taxes, we just simply run out of money, just like you do.
Yeah, I understand that. But again, I don't think we can point fingers here. This is a long-term problem. It goes back before your term as county executive. It goes back at least to the Great Recession. But the bottom line is, as you said in your first response to my first question, and Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, I'll be done after this. The school system is technically a state agency. And the system's in crisis, and we're failing our students in Montgomery County, all of us. And, ultimately, my opinion is if the county and the school system can't figure out how to adequately fund schools, then the state does need to take a stronger hand and step into this, because that ultimately would be our responsibility. But I would like to see an explicit plan, well communicated to the delegation from the school system about how the shortage is going to be addressed, with commitments from the county. And frankly, I would hope the school system would communicate better with us, because we've been trading texts back and forth, but the issue you raised with attendance is the first I've heard of it. And I think the first that most members of this delegation have heard of it. And that's something we can resolve with a 10-minute call to the superintendent of schools. And
Please do
the
that.
delegation wasn't aware. So, the communication needs to be a lot better on these things. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. County Executive.
Just going to follow up really briefly, because there are a few things that Delegate Lutke said that I want to expand on. And let me just say I completely agree with the fact that the school system is in a situation I've never seen before, and absolutely is in crisis mode, trying to address all of it. Delegate Lutke, we have reached out to the school system. We're not just waiting for them to reach out to us. There have been numerous meetings and calls, operational meetings and calls. I know at the executive branch level that the council isn't privy to, but that have been trying to more than just support, but also be proactive in addressing some of the myriad of issues that the school system has had right now. So I do want to assure you that the executive branch is doing everything humanly possible, not just waiting for them to reach out, but working collaboratively with them on a variety of different issues. The other thing, just really quickly is we had recruitment and retention issues prior to the last month and a half. And as you noted, Delegate Lutke, and I 1000% agree with you, it's about to get exponentially worse. I suspect there will be many more people leaving professions that we critically need. And so we do have to work collaboratively as a team, all rowing in the same direction to think through whether things like bonuses, any tool that we can think of to make it more attractive for people to either stay in their positions or come to Montgomery County and begin their professional careers here and ensure that they're well compensated while they are, is a fundamental issue that all of us have a role to be able to play in. And as the county executive noted, this council has supported all of the MCPS's requests for their operating budgets at what they requested. We know that the needs have now changed. And so we did, as an example, we appropriated over $5 million to support newly arriving students and families who have come over in this most recent wave in immigration, fleeing violence, fleeing extreme climate challenges, fleeing extreme economic challenges in their countries of origin. That funding does not directly appear in MCPS's budget, but it directly supports MCPS's efforts. And what Health and Human Services is doing, what the Street Outreach Network is doing to help children and youth in crisis right now is an important part of this broader ecosystem. So the funding isn't just going to MCPS directly, as it needs to continue to do, and where possible expanded, but we're supporting our children, youth, and families in a myriad of other ways too. I just wanted to make that note, but I completely respect the passion that you brought to your questions and share your concerns.
Thank you, Mr. President. Last question, Senator Zucker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I know when we started this conversation, Mr. County Executive and Mr. President, obviously I hope that you both feel better, as well as Delegate Wilkins and everybody that is recovering from illness and going through this pandemic. But I know when you started this conversation, you talked about what the needs are of the county, and let this group make it perfectly clear that the House and the Senate Montgomery County delegation will continue delivering for our constituents when it comes to capital relief, making sure our community is safe with the ghost guns. But I join my colleagues in just our overall concern about what's happening with Montgomery County Public Schools, where there's a complete and utter breakdown in communication. I mean, I'm not even sure what the positivity rate is right now in Montgomery County Public Schools, because I know as a parent, I haven't gotten any communication, and yet I'm sure that there's widespread COVID cases. So I guess one is, do we have a good idea what the positivity rate right now, what do we know what the positivity rate is right now amongst Montgomery County Public School students? And second is, at what point does Montgomery County government step in and take the lead, where right now I'm not even sure that our constituents know what the goalposts are anymore when it comes to what Montgomery County Public Schools is doing. I know time is of the essence now, both with addressing these concerns and also with this meeting. So I don't know if any of you can add light to this.
Their dashboard is inexplicable to me. I mean, it's been a changing set of information. I do know that, the first 4 days of this week, cases were 1,700, 2,500, 1,300, and 1,000. But without knowing how many tests were given each day, it's hard to, extrapolate a positivity rate, and that information I don't have. I had a long talk with my health people yesterday. I know that they're frustrated because every time MCPS makes a decision, it's always, well, we've talked to, the health people in Montgomery County, and, this is what we're doing. These are not our recommendations. And so today they're meeting with the school system. Basically, they're telling them that, in our opinion, the best solution is to do a temporary pause and go to, one of the options, and I've talked with Jennifer Martin about this, was what we're calling synchronous learning, but basically virtual, both in school and out of school. And so a teacher would teach a single lesson to everybody, and some kids would come into school. I thought it was important that there be some kids, that particularly the low-income kids, whose parents would have to stop working for this duration, that would be a disaster. And so, Jennifer acknowledged that we could do a hybrid of some kids in school and some kids at home. She's pushed that out to Monifa. I've pushed it out to Monifa, and our health people now we're just going to tell them we're no longer just going to sit quietly. And when they declare this is a decision we've made, there is no we in this decision. And they've got to, either defend what they're doing, or we're going to tell them and be very clear about what we think the best practices are. So it should be an interesting discussion. I've been shuttling back and forth between Jennifer and Monifa for a while now, trying to get people to a common place.
Sure.
I will say she has a very hard job, and Monifa is terrified by the reaction to closing schools. This is something people are really worried about, but it's temporary. I think if we all believe what everybody's saying about Omicron, that this wave will wash over us and we can resume something more normalish. But the school system needs to take a pause and end the chaos. It's way too chaotic right now.
Senator Zucker, thank you for that question. I appreciate our conversation yesterday where you shared your personal story of the challenges you had with your family. And they're not, obviously multiply that by several thousand, probably more. I would say just a couple of things, just headline here. The superintendent and her team will be coming before the council on Tuesday morning, sitting as the Board of Health. Councilmember Rice has also, in addition to that, scheduled an education and culture session, which I believe is the following day, to expand even further, to give us more time to be able to engage in a public dialogue with the school system. I would like to humbly request, Chairman Corman, that if any of the members of the delegation have questions that they would like to ask through us on Tuesday morning, please share that with us, and we will work with Mel and make sure that we incorporate those questions into the questions that we ask on Tuesday morning, and if as a follow-up on Wednesday if we don't get through all of them. I suspect many of your questions will be similar to the questions that we have, mostly operational in nature, such as the one that you just mentioned, Senator Zucker, how decisions are being made on the development of the dashboard, why changes were made to the dashboard to now just reflect the overall number of reported test positive cases, not percentages, not giving us more information on the ground that anybody within reason, whether faculty, staff, support staff, or parents, would love to know to be able to decide whether they're going to send their loved one to school or not, or be concerned about being able to report to work, is something that's going to be really important.
Okay, we have two more questions because I'll remind my colleagues this is question time. So Delegate Resnick, do you have a question?
I will ask the county executive to clarify a comment he just made. Mr. County Executive, you just said that is the whatever hybrid process you're looking at for the schools, that it's the low income kids that are going to be that can come in while everyone else might be remote. I want to remind you that the assumption that somehow middle-class kids all have parents who can Zoom to work every day is a poor assumption. And that if all we're doing is allowing, making the assumption that middle-class kids are going to be home on Zoom all day long, a lot of those kids may end up not middle class for much longer if their parents lose their jobs. So could you please clarify a little bit as to what this hybrid model looks like?
Is an opt-in for parents or an opt-out. Parents would be able to say, I want my kid to go to school. Parents would be able to say, I don't want my kid to go to school. And the students would receive the same instruction, whether they were in school or out of school. If a kid's sick, they could plug into the classroom immediately because the instruction would be going on. I only raised the low income issue because we know that disproportionately it's going to hammer that community. And just saying we should just close school for 2 weeks is going to have a way disproportionate impact. But that was illustrative. The actual request is that it be opt-in, opt-out for all parents.
Fair enough. And just a quick follow-up. In that case, what happens if 80% of parents decide to send their kids to school? What's the point of this system?
we're hoping that, well, out first place, if 80% did, it would still be a 20% reduction in the load. If the school system does that and we discover they cannot manage the cases, then we'd have to go another step beyond that. The assumption is a lot of parents want to be home, and that a lot of kids would wind up not in school if that's available. That's what we're hoping for, but it's short of, shutting everything down. This was a place in between that made sure we had places for students. It is one of the things we were able to do before was we had these remote learning centers, but with daycares back in business now and county facilities being used now, we don't have the options for spaces or even for people that we had a year ago. So we've got to figure out how we make sure no student actually gets left behind in whatever it is we do. And if I had a perfect solution, I'd probably be running education in the entire country. But we don't.
Thank you for the second bite at the apple, Mr. Chairman.
Great. Well, thank you again to the County Executive and County Council President. Obviously, we're in a very difficult time, so appreciate you being here to address some questions and the follow-up that will undoubtedly continue after this. Colleagues, we're going to move on to the rest of our agenda, starting with late filed bills. First up, we have a bill from Delegate Shi, and this is a great opportunity to congratulate Delegate Shi on being named Deputy Majority Whip yesterday by the Speaker. Congratulations, Delegate Shi. The bill is MC 24-22, Montgomery County Board of Education, Data Disaggregation Policy and Racial Disparity Comparisons. Delegate Shi, why is the bill late?
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. As you recall, we had a briefing with MCPS leadership this year before the legislative session. And during the meeting, Delegate Barbie was the one who raised the concern about why Asian American student data, performance data was not separate from whites and others, whereas the Black and Brown students' data were separately tracked. With the Asian student population growth and a comparable size, we thought it's important to also know how they perform in future analysis and reports. I believe the system already does that, but they just don't separate that. So by the time
the bill's late because you found out about the issue late, is that
right? We found out by the time we decided to. It was already after the deadline, I think. Sorry.
Perfect. Thank you for clarifying. Is there a motion on the late filed bill?
Move favorable.
Delegate Lukey moves favorable. Delegate Resnick seconds. All in favor of accepting the late file, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Does anyone want to be recorded in the negative? Does anybody want to abstain? Great. The bill is accepted for late file. It will be heard by the full delegation next Friday at our meeting. The second late filed bill is from Delegate Fraser Hidalgo, MC 2522, Montgomery County deer hunting Sundays. Delegate Fraser Hidalgo, why is the bill late?
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. The bill is late because there was some discrepancy in council as to whether the original bills had expired as far as that pilot is concerned. And there were some folks in some of the attorneys that thought that it had not expired and it had been fixed, and others thought that it didn't. So after a lot of research, they finally came back and said, yes, we actually have to fix it. So it was kind of a discrepancy between lawyers.
Got it. So your senator messed up. I understand. Is there a motion on the late file?
Move to accept the late file.
Delegate Lukey moves to accept. Delegate Collison seconds. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Does anyone want to be recorded in the negative? Does anybody want to abstain?
Thank you.
Terrific. That bill will also be heard for its full hearing next Friday at our delegation meeting. We'll now move to our voting session, starting with Delegate Shi and the Economic Development Committee. Chair Shi.
Thank you, Chair Coleman, and good morning again, everyone. The Economic Development Committee had a very efficient work session last week and voted out 5 alcohol bills. So I would like to start with MC 622, which was introduced by Montgomery County. And I want to make a note of acknowledging several county representatives here. If you have any questions, Melanie Wenger, Kathy Durbin, and Keith Miller representing the county are here. MC 622 would simply allow a new consumption-only marketplace license to be issued to either the property manager or developer of a shopping center. So a consumer could enjoy a drink while shopping within that shopping center or district, which we have several of in Montgomery County. And as you recall, we approved this bill a couple of years back, and now it came back ready to be implemented with some new tweaks, adding the property manager part to receive the license, and also redefine the scope of distance to be more clear. So that's what the bill does.
Any questions for Delegate Shi? Is there a motion on the bill?
I move the bill.
Is there a second?
Second.
Delegate Shi moves the bill. Delegate Lutke seconds. Any discussion? All in favor of MC 622, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody like to be recorded in opposition? Would anybody like to abstain? Great, the bill passes. Delegate Chair Chi.
Thank you. Next is MC 722, which would allow microbreweries to also sell beer, wine, and the liquor in Montgomery County. It's very simple.
Any questions for Chair Chi? Is there a motion on the bill?
I move the bill.
Chair Chi moves the bill. Delegate Solomon seconds. Any discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Would anybody like to be recorded in the negative? Would anybody like to abstain? The bill passes. Chair Chi.
Thank you. Next is MC 1222, introduced by District 14 team. It would allow voters of the election District 12 to decide if they want the sale of beer, wine, liquor 7 days a week, just like the rest of Montgomery County.
Any questions for Chair Chi? Have we gotten to the bottom of why some Damascus still are pro-prohibition? Is there a motion on the bill?
Move favorable.
Second.
Delegate Lutke moves the bill. Delegate Resnick seconds. Any discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody like to be recorded in the negative? Would anybody like to abstain? Bill passes. Chair Chi.
Thank you. Next is MC 2122. It's also introduced by District 14 team for Damascus. It would simply allow farm breweries and limited certain wineries, farm wineries, to also be able to sell beer and wine for on and off premise consumption.
Any questions for Chair Chi? Is there a motion on the bill?
So moved.
Second.
I think Delegate Foley moved the bill. Delegate Chi, Chair Chi seconded. Any discussion?
I did not. Someone else seconded.
Okay, Delegate Solomon seconded, excuse me.
Okay. All right.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor of the bill, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Would anybody like to be recorded in the negative? Would anybody like to abstain? The bill passes. Chair Chi, I believe you have one more to go.
Yes, the last one is MC 2322. This one is in District 15 in Poolsville in particular for the Cross Vine Project, which is currently a wine crushing facility. This bill would simply allow the county to issue a production license and a retail license so they actually can produce wine and then sell for on-premise testing and so forth, tasting and so forth. Thank you.
Any questions on the bill? Is there a motion?
Move the
So
bill.
moved. Second.
I'm going Delegate Resnick moves the bill. Delegate Foley seconds. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, anyone want to be recorded in opposition? And anyone want to abstain? No. Okay, the bill passes. Thank you, Chair Chi, for report. We will now turn to the Education, Elections, and Housing Committee. Chair Shetty.
Thank you, Chair Corman. The Education, Elections, and Housing Committee held a similarly efficient committee work session on January 3rd, where we considered and passed unanimously 4 of our local bills. So we'll start with MC 422, Montgomery County Board of Education election of members. This was requested by Delegate Moon. There was one amendment made to this that per Delegate Kaiser's recommendation pushed out the effective date to allow for the Board of Elections to handle implementation in a smooth process. The amendment passed unanimously, as did the bill.
Great. Why don't we take the, well, first of all, any discussion up front?
Move the amendment.
Second.
Delegate Moon moves the amendment. Delegate Blokovich-Carr seconds. All in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed to the amendment or abstaining? Okay, the amendment passes. On the bill,
Move favorable. Second.
Delegate Cullison moves favorable. I'm sorry, I missed who seconded.
Kaiser.
Delegate Kaiser. Thank you. Any discussion on the bill? Okay. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Does anybody need to abstain? Great. The bill passes. Chair Shetty.
Thank you, Chair Corman. MC 522, Montgomery County Board of Education Student Member Scholarship offered by Delegate Ludke passed unanimously. I would like to move the bill, if I may.
Second. And Delegate Cullison seconds. Is there any discussion? Okay, all in favor of the bill, please signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Anybody need to abstain? Terrific, the bill passes.
Thank you, colleagues. Bill MC 1322, Montgomery County Voting Methods, requested by Delegate Blokovich-Carr. This is our ranked choice voting bill. It passed the delegation unanimously last year, and I believe the year prior. There was one amendment offered that provides additional flexibility to the county to choose which of the offices listed may be conducted via ranked choice voting. I would like to request that we move the amendment, please.
Second.
Chair Shetty moves the amendment. Delegate Blokovich-Carr seconds. Any discussion on the amendment? Okay,
The bill provides for both ranked choice voting and approval voting, right?
Yeah, so go ahead, Chair Shetty, you may ask that now.
It's not an amendment, but.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, okay, just want to clarify, thank you.
Yes.
It does, yeah, it does. On the amendment, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed to the amendment? Anyone abstain? Okay, the amendment's adopted. Chair Shetty.
I'd like to move the bill as amended, please.
Second.
Delegate Cullison seconds. Is there any discussion on the bill which doesn't include the Barve method of voting?
It's the simpler, more straightforward Barve method of voting.
Right. Okay. All in favor of the bill's amendment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Would you like to be recorded in opposition? Anybody like to abstain? Great. The bill passes. One more to go, Chair Shetty.
Thank you, Chair Corman. MC 1622, Montgomery County Board of Education membership requested by Delegate Stewart. This bill passed unanimously with no amendment. I'd like to request that we move the bill.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Great. Chair Shetty moves the bill. Delegate Cullison seconds. Is there any discussion on this bill?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Delegate Resnick.
just a quick reiteration. What does the bill actually do? Just a reminder.
This bill adds one additional at-large member to the Board of Education.
Thank you. I forgot.
That's okay. Thank you for the question.
Any further discussion or questions? Okay, on the bill, I'm going to try to do this by voice vote. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed or would like to be recorded in opposition? Anyone planning to run for this seat and need to abstain? The bill passes. Thank you, Chair Shetty. We'll now turn to the Land Use, Transportation, and Public Safety Committee, and I believe Vice Chair Acevero will be leading us through this report. Mr. Vice Chair.
Yes, good morning, colleagues. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Land Use, Transportation, and Public Safety Committee had a very productive meeting, and we considered a bill that was a reintroduction. It was requested by Delegate Crutchfield, a reintroduction because this delegation passed the bill favorable with amendments last session, 24-0, and it passed the House. And so this is a reintroduction. There were no amendments, and the bill essentially authorizes the Montgomery County Department of Transportation to be the agency that's responsible for implementing speed monitoring system. And instead of law enforcement officers signing off or handling this, this is something that would be the sole responsibility of DOT, and therefore an employee of the department would be signing off on these citations. And so, as I said, it's no amendments, reintroduction. This delegation supported it. And so the committee voted it out favorable, and I move that we support.
Great. It looks like there's some discussion. So why don't we just start with the questions before we get to the moving of the bill on the second, and then we'll start with Delegate Barbay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Delegate, I asked a question during the public hearing as to whether or not the police would still be deciding where the speed cameras would be placed. Would that power to decide where to locate the cameras be changed from the police department to the Department of Transportation?
Mr. Chair, may I answer that question? Okay.
Yes. Yes.
No, that power does not change from the state. The state is actually the entity that makes those decisions along with the county.
Maybe I didn't ask the question correctly. Currently, I understand the police department decides where cameras are placed. And my impression of this bill is that under this bill, the decision of where to place photo radar or red light cameras would be moved from the police department to the county transportation department. Am I wrong or right on that?
That is incorrect, Delegate Barbay. Actually, again, the police department does not make that decision. It is a decision that is based on information from the state and the county. So no, that is not correct.
Okay, well, I'll wait for the other questioners, but I might special order the bill for until the next voting session, just to clear that up. And I apologize in advance for not having focused on this before this voting session.
No problem.
Delegate Barbay, Delegate Kaiser.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When it comes to this bill, I'm sorry, I have a toddler giving me a pumpkin right now. I might have to hold off. I know why we're doing this bill, and I appreciate the concern and certainly believe that there's a reason to consider moving it from the county police. But do we have reason to believe that DOT will be any better or unbiased? And is there any training component being put there with the DOT employees?
Right. So there's no information about training necessarily, but they are the ones that usually are involved with our traffic pedestrian issues. And so the whole premise is that once you take away this kind of discretionary stopping by the police and or just reviewing speed camera information, that again removes the bias. There is some data to indicate that as well, Delegate Kaiser.
Okay, but I heard you say partly like it's the assumption that they'll do it better.
Well, I don't think it's you're right in the sense that they are not currently doing it. So again, you're right. We would probably need to evaluate data in the future to just indicate that. But currently, all data indicates removing it from police entities does provide better information as far as not making sure people are stopped in in biased ways.
Okay, thank you.
And Delegate Crutchfield, if I might add,
Sure.
really quickly, that the county's DOT is an executive agency, and if we recall, the county council passed legislation, racial equity and social justice program, that each department of agency is sort of responsible for putting forth a plan on how they're going to implement this particular county law with respect to their agency to include training. So I know they'll certainly, be addressed in that piece of it, and as far as your question on the training and whatnot.
Thank you.
Delegate Fraser Hidalgo.
Thank you. This was a little bit of a contentious bill as it made its way through the House and the Senate last year. So a couple of questions to get out. Is there anyone or any organization, AAA, is there anyone opposed to this bill?
I have never received information to indicate that. So right now, all I can answer is no. I have not received that direct information to indicate there's anybody that's been, any organization that has been against this.
Okay, yeah, I'm just trying to prevent, potentially getting ahead of what happened last time, because last time that's what was said, and then when we got into full committee, then all of a sudden AAA was very, very upset and became very vocal, and it actually ended up becoming a bit messy, and I'm trying to avoid that now.
And I appreciate that, Delegate, because I have not heard specifically from AAA at all. So I just don't have that feedback for you.
Okay, and I'm sorry, did somebody?
Now, Delegate Fraser Hidalgo, I just wanted to also say that we did not hear from them as well.
Okay, great. And the other thing, there was mention about bias, but there aren't any actual police officers that are involved in any traffic stops. This is all automated cameras, right? This is just moving automated cameras. So when we're talking about the police bias, how does that impact this bill?
Yeah, what we're talking about is specifically dealing with overall, eventually, hopefully we'll get to a point where there are more electronic devices used, automated systems used. So that's really what that is about. But yeah, you're absolutely correct. There should not be any bias because it is automated. So
okay,
there are no specific officers, you're right, correctly involved right now.
Okay, and then the last question that I have is, currently, my understanding is that if you receive a ticket from one of these automated cameras, that a actual sworn police officer looks through, makes sure that it complies and that it's accurate, and then signs off on it. A sworn police officer. How do you how do you address the idea of a sworn, police officer signing off on that ticket versus a Department of Transportation employee? Did that concern come up? Was there questions? Was there conversation about a sworn officer versus an employee? Did that come up at all?
No, there weren't any issues about that I'm aware of. And I think currently even the sworn officer that is reviewing this had been involved with the MDOT folks. So I don't, as I mentioned before, I'm not aware of there being issues with that coming up at all right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Fraser Hidalgo. Vice Chair Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill is enabling legislation. So it doesn't change anything. It doesn't transfer anything away from the police to the Montgomery County Department of Transportation. It simply gives the Montgomery County government the authority to consider whether they want to make such a change. Isn't that so?
That is correct.
And isn't it the case that our neighboring jurisdiction, the District of Columbia, recently transferred the authority for their automated enforcement from the police to their Department of Transportation? Isn't that so?
That is also correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair Carr. Delegate Chi.
Thank you, Chair Coleman. My question is similar to Delegate Fraser Hidalgo's earlier question. I'm just curious what problem we're trying to solve with this bill, because I'm not clear if it's automated speed camera enforcement. And I heard some mention of biases and all that. I think it's really important for us to understand to what extent leaving this function within the police department is not a good idea, because I could easily picture biases when there's human contact, right? Which is very subjective, and all kinds of incidents have happened. But in terms of automated enforcement, I think it would be helpful for us to better understand that. Thank you.
All right. So what we have found out is that when you have situations where there are any possibility of police contact, even though it's automated, there is a possibility of police contact as well, okay? The other piece is that you're dealing with the fact that putting speed cameras or other places where there could be bias, okay, such as putting them in neighborhoods, et cetera, that creates bias. So there is bias, even though, like you're saying, yeah, most bias occurs directly with individuals. There is still bias with the fact that possibly, the situation itself of being stopped will create an issue, okay? The speed cameras eliminate, and it's all about eliminating the possibility of having those interactions. And that's really what this is all about. We don't want folks to interact with police officers or others that may put them into a negative situation. And that's what this is all about, giving our county council the authority to be able to move it from the police department where those negative interactions happen. And even though they are speed devices, we can also, eliminate as much as we can all of those interactions. And that's one of the things that speed cameras really do ultimately, Delegate Chi, is they really eliminate that. And that's what's been going on. That's what we've seen throughout our country, is that there are issues with Black and brown folks, and in particular, Black people having these interactions, whatever they may be, through stops, that are unlawful, through lawful stops, all of that occurs. And that's what this does. It just eliminates all of that from occurring.
Okay, Delegate Shetty.
Thank you, Chair Corman. First, thank you, Delegate Crutchfield, for bringing this bill back. I think it's a really important bill for a number of reasons. And I just want to clarify something. So my understanding is that under state law currently, municipalities have the authority to establish their own their own speed camera program if they wish. Isn't that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. So this is really important in District 18 in particular, and many jurisdictions in Montgomery County, but D18 has 8 municipalities within it. So we care a lot about this. And what we've seen locally is that some jurisdictions within our district have the ability to have their own police department. And those that have police departments have been more successful in launching speed camera programs than those that do not. So isn't it correct that under current state law, this need to have a sworn officer sign off on the statements or on these automated tickets generated could potentially pose a barrier, even though the state law currently allows for municipalities to create these programs? The inability for many municipalities that do not have police forces within them could potentially cause a barrier to those smaller jurisdictions that don't have that same ability. Isn't that right?
That is correct.
Thank you. This is super helpful information and something that we've definitely seen happen throughout District 18, where we do have these types of different municipalities that have different abilities to do this. So my understanding then is under your bill, potentially allowing the county to transfer authority to DOT could even the playing field between these different types of municipalities that would then have the option to allow Montgomery County's Department of Transportation to sign off on these tickets that are generated within their jurisdiction.
That is correct.
Thank you so much, Delegate. Really appreciate your work on this.
Delegate Shetty, Delegate Solomon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate Acevero and Delegate Crutchfield for taking questions. I guess just to sort of build off of what my colleague from District 18 was asking, I know one of the other major concerns many of us have for our constituents is pedestrian safety and safety on our roads. And it was my understanding that one of the other primary reasons for this bill, and just like a confirmation on this, is that moving the speed camera enforcement and automated enforcement out of the police, or giving the county the authority to do that, would also put these types of enforcement actions more into the transportation realm and the pedestrian safety realm, to incorporate it into road redesign, intersection redesign, to keep our constituents safer, as opposed to just a law enforcement realm. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Solomon and the rest of District 18. Delegate Lutke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would, I think there's a lot of debate around the bill, but I would just add to the earlier comments in favor of it that I think the best argument for this bill is it just gives the county the flexibility to focus law enforcement on law enforcement. And, we don't necessarily need law enforcement officers to be looking at pictures and signing off on license plate numbers, when their time for these highly trained folks could be better spent elsewhere. So, I think last year and this year both, there was a lot of, obvious debate about the bill that sort of, I think sometimes has gone beyond the scope of the bill, but there are good government reasons to do it. So I'll be voting in favor.
Thank you, Delegate Lukey.
Thank you, Delegate Lukey. Delegate Wilkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate Solomon took the words out of my mouth, but I still wanted to chime in support of this bill. I think for many of our jurisdictions, our residents are really concerned about pedestrian safety, neighborhood safety as it comes to traffic issues. And I know that for me personally, in working with the police and other departments, I think it makes much more sense for enforcement to really have that broader view of the County Department of Transportation, where they have a plan and they're working on, getting to zero pedestrian fatalities. They're looking at the larger highway plans. They're looking at this from such a broader lens, and we're already working with them in various neighborhoods in our communities around pedestrian safety and other issues. So to me, it makes much more sense that we add this aspect to their portfolio for us to really have it all integrated. And I think that it makes a lot of sense for this to move over to the county and the county decision-making. And I believe that would be a better experience for us and our constituents as we work to get to zero fatalities. So I want to speak up in support of the bill and look forward to voting for it.
Thank you, Delegate Wilkins. Appreciate everybody's comments. Delegate Barve, second bite at the apple.
Yeah, could someone please explain to me how a photo radar or a photo red light camera results in police interaction? Because my understanding is you run a red light or you speed, and then they mail you a ticket. There's no such thing as a police officer pulling you over. Maybe I'm wrong about that.
Delegate Crutchfield, do you want to address that as the sponsor of the bill?
Yeah, let me just mention to you, one of the things that I think you need to also, and we've talked about earlier, is the fact that there is a police officer that currently takes a look at this. And really, as Delegate Lukey and I think others mentioned, we're now trying to attempt to remove that whole aspect from this as much as we possibly can. But that's really kind of where the interaction does occur with that. You can also have police officers, and I have had this happen, where I have gone past the camera and a police officer has come up behind me. So there are times, and we're not taking away that discretionary power of the police officer, but just eliminating, again, the possibility of these interactions, whatever they may be.
How would there be an interaction? I don't understand.
Well, again, like I said, all I'm simply saying is that they do take a look at the ticket, okay? And that's what we talked about earlier, is that right now, the way the process is that once a camera indicates that you have a ticket, then there is a sworn police officer that takes a look at that. And that's one of the interactions that I'm aware of that happens with the automated traffic ticketing right now.
Okay, well, I will press my motion to special order. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, there's a motion of special order. Chair Severo, how do you?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, let me just say, I think I appreciate the sponsor for bringing this back. I think it is certainly legislation that is needed. I think everyone has chimed in with some really good points that I won't reiterate as to why we need this enabling legislation. But what I do want to ensure is that this bill passes again unanimously in the delegation, the same way it passed last year, 24-0, favorable with amendments. And so I'm willing to accept that special order motion so that Delegate Barve can, get the answers that he needs so that, when we come back, we have a unanimous vote. But I support this. I think it's something that needs to be passed, and hopefully we'll be able to do that next week.
Thank you, Vice Chair Severo. The bill's special order till our next voting session, which is next Friday. And just to put this in a little bit of context, everybody, the blueback for this bill was introduced on Wednesday, so we're not really holding anything up process-wise by delaying the vote until next week. So, obviously the county position won't be made at a hearing until after we vote, but it is working through the process to get scheduled for a full committee hearing. With that, we will turn to our next committee report. Thank you, Vice Chair Severo. Metro Washington Area Committee, Chair Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the first two bills, I am going to defer to the committee vice chair, Delegate Charkoudian.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have the first bill is PGMC 100-22, Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, Montgomery County Council and District Council voting thresholds. And this bill essentially adjusts the voting thresholds to reflect the changes that we will see coming in the additional county council members. So we passed it unanimously, and I move the bill favorably.
Is there a second?
Second.
Delegate Charkoudian moves the bill. Delegate Carr seconds. Any discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Would anybody like to abstain? Terrific. Vice Chair Charkoudian.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next bill is PGMC 101-22, Montgomery County Planning Board Open Meetings, Video and Audio Streaming and Minutes. And this bill essentially requires live streaming of meetings and posting of minutes for the County Planning Board, similar to several of the other county and bi-county bodies that we have established these requirements for, and state bodies that we've established these requirements for. It was moved favorable by the committee, and I move for a favorable vote in the full delegation.
Is there a second?
Second.
Vice Chair Charkoudian moves the bill. Delegate Blakovich Carr seconds. Any discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Would anybody like to abstain? The bill passes. Thank you. I think we're back to Chair Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next bill is PGMC 105-22, WSSC Minority Business Enterprise Utilization Program Termination Extension. This bill extends by 1 year a sunset. WSSC is working on the disparity study that's required, but due to the pandemic, that things got delayed. So this just gives them an extra year. The bill came out of the committee unanimously favorable. I will move the bill.
Is there a second?
Second.
Delegate or Chair Carr moves the bill. Vice Chair Charkoudian seconds. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor of the bill, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Getting a little lax with our eyes late in the meeting here. Anyone want to be recorded in the negative? Anyone want to abstain? Terrific. The bill passes. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next bill is PGMC 106-22, WSSC Hiring and Promotion Preferences, Veterans and Their Spouses. The bill strikes obsolete references to veteran preferences in the statute for WSSC, and it conforms them to the state statute on veteran preferences. The bill came out of the committee unanimously favorable, and I will move the bill.
Second.
Chair Carr moves the bill. Delegate Lutke seconds. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone like to abstain? Great, the bill passes. Thank you, Chair Carr and the Metro Washington Committee. Thank you all for the full day of work, both the discussion with our county leaders and the discussion on all the bills. It's about half of our bills that we've just moved through, at least until more of you come up with late files. So we're in really good shape this early in the session to have gotten that much work done. We will turn to committee announcements. Chair Chi.
Thank you. Our Economic Development Committee will have one last work session on Thursday. It should already be on everyone's calendar to tackle MC 822 about Business Improvement District. Oh, I welcomed, of course. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Chi. Chair Shetty.
Thank you, Chair Corman. The Education, Elections, and Housing Committee has worked to set a regular time for our committee's meetings, which will be, generally speaking, Tuesdays at 10 a.m. This coming Tuesday, we will not have a work session, but we will likely have one the following Tuesday, January 25th at 10 a.m. to review Delegate Carr's landlord-tenant licensing bill, as well as Delegate Chi's bill that was just filed today. Thank you.
Great. Vice Chair Acevedo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just more information will be forthcoming from the chair about committee meetings to members. So please look out for the emails for that. Thank you.
Great. And thank you for stepping in at the last moment here today. Appreciate it. Chair Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Metro Washington Area Committee meets on Monday at 7 p.m. to take up our hopefully final two bills.
Terrific. Anybody else have any questions or comments for the good of the order? Okay, well, everybody have a great weekend.